Thank you so much, Dr. Goda. Thank you so much to the rabbis for hosting this. Thank you to Hillel and Chabad for getting along. That doesn't happen on every campus in America, you know? And that shows that this is a place that gets things right. You have a reputation for being the campus that handles the Jewish issue better than any campus in America. And I applaud you for that. So thank you to everyone who made that happen, because it's not something that can be taken for granted. Students in other campuses aren't having as much fun as these guys are. So I hope they realize how blessed they are to be Gators, because the non-Gators aren't getting it too good right now. So as you heard from Dr. Goda's introduction, I've been around, I've spoken in all 50 states, culminating in a talk in Hawaii in a synagogue that trademarked the word shaloha. And I flew to America a week ago, Friday, so it's been almost 2 weeks now. And of course I flew on El Al, which has a monopoly right now, unfortunately, on flights in and out of Israel. And I got excited because the seat next to me was still open until right before the door of the plane was closing, and I thought I won the lottery and got 2 seats in a row on an El Al plane. And then who came and sat next to me? A Cocker Spaniel. I could not make that up. Her name was Lola. And so you never know what you're going to get on El Al. And it's a war, and only people are coming on solidarity missions and everything, and I encourage people to come to Israel and see the devastation and the destruction that happened on October 7th, 4 months ago today, for yourselves. Go around the communities around Gaza that are and were so beautiful and now have been permanently scarred. Every house says on it how many people were murdered there, how many people were kidnapped. It's a little overwhelming, but it's a reminder of what we're fighting for right now, and we can't forget. We can't forget what happened on October 7th, and we can't let the media forget about it. Too many articles right now are being written about what's going on right now. Without that, can we say the word? Context of what happened on that day. We have to stay in October 8th mode forever. And to that end, the day that I left for this trip, I went into Gaza itself. I have a cousin who was the deputy commander of the forces in Khan Yunis, and I called him up to ask him if he's got anything that I should share with the people on the speaking tour. And he says to me, why are you asking me? Come and see things for yourself. And I thought he was kidding. And at the end of the conversation, though, he said, be there on the border at 9:30 on Monday. Just get permission from the IDF. And so I called the right person at the IDF, who said, no. Try again in a couple days. And I tried again in a couple days, and they said, no. The chief of staff of the army is coming tomorrow. He's more important than you. And the last night before I left, I called up again, please let me in. I'm going to be talking to a very important group of people in Gainesville, Florida. And they said, no. And I called up my cousin all disappointed. They're not letting me in. And he said, screw them, they won't know. Just come. And so I did. I brought my passport, but they didn't ask to see it anywhere on my way into Gaza. So I just came. And I toured around all over, and Rabbi, you won't believe this, but I came out of Gaza with a lot more emunah, a lot more faith than I had when I came in. Because until then, what I'd been saying is, okay, we're doing surprisingly well on the media battlefield, but the military battlefield, not so hot. You know, our hostages aren't home. The leaders of Hamas, most of them are not yet dead. And that's not victory. But when I came there, first of all, I saw the morale of the soldiers who had been away from their families fighting for 3 months and told me to tell the world, we need just a little more time. We're almost done accomplishing very important goals. Now, keep in mind, the Hamas prepared for this war for 20 years. Israel prepared for this war for 0, to the point that I had a one-on-one briefing with Netanyahu's national security advisor on October 6th at 2 p.m. And when I asked him about Hamas, he said, oh, they're restrained. That's how unready we were. And there was more terror infrastructure in Gaza, in one small piece of land, than there was anywhere else in the world ever. 80% of the houses had some kind of terror infrastructure, guns, entrances to tunnels, rocket launchers, rockets, 100% of the schools. And despite all that, the IDF's gone in, and now 95% of the rockets are gone, of the 20,000 that they had ready to go. On October 7th, 18 of the 24 battalions are gone, and they've reconquered pretty much everything except for the southern communities. They've come a long way. Now, to put this into perspective, this was my 4th time in Gaza. My first time in Gaza was as a teenager. I went on an Israel program, and they took us to, one of the perks of this trip was they took us to what was called the Palm Beach Hotel. A nice resort on the beach in Gaza. When you think of Gaza, you don't really think of white sandy beaches, but they're there, and they're lovely, and Gaza had so much potential. The second time I came to Gaza was as a journalist. I covered politics for a quarter century, and I followed the politicians wherever they went. And so a group of left-wing politicians went to visit the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat at his palace in Gaza. And I remember that day like it was yesterday for a couple reasons. First of all, because on the way in they make you leave your cell phones, because Israel has used cell phones as remote controls to kill terrorists. And on the way back out, I forgot to take my phone. And an Israeli general and a Palestinian general who had not met in months had to meet that day to get back my phone. The second reason why I felt like it was yesterday was because midway through the meeting, Arafat kicked the journalists out of the room so he could talk alone to the politicians. And the New York Times correspondent did not leave. She pretended to be the daughter of one of the members of Knesset. And as I'm leaving the room, I looked back and I saw Yasser Arafat giving this journalist a big kiss on her forehead. And I remember thinking, I would rather die than be kissed by that man. You know, he wasn't a looker, that Arafat. And so I lost a little bit of respect for the New York Times already back then. My third time in Gaza was as a soldier. It was basic training in an artillery unit, but I transferred into the spokesman's unit of the IDF for my reserve duty because I wanted to help Israel against its enemies using my skills and experience as a journalist. But did they call me up to help Israel against its enemies? No, I got called up for the hitnatkut, for the withdrawal from Gaza, having to explain Jews fighting Jews. I took around 2 VIPs, the correspondent in Israel from Fox and the correspondent in Israel from the New York Times, together. They got along. They were even married to each other, and still are. Opposites attract sometimes. And so I remember at the time we were talking about how Gaza could become the Singapore on the Mediterranean. It could have, until October 7th at about 6:25 a.m. And it didn't, because the Hamas overthrew the rightful Palestinian leaders in Gaza. I don't like the word coup so much. I like the word overthrow, because it describes how they took power. They took Abbas's people and threw them off of the top of buildings to the floor. They literally overthrew them. And the Palestinian people did not have to suffer, but they did, and they have. And remember where they were on October 6th. On October 6th, Israel was moving full speed ahead to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. President Biden wanted to reach an agreement by, the deadline was, Super Tuesday, next month. And it would have happened. And as part of that deal, Israel would have ended up normalizing relations eventually with the entire Arab and Muslim world that's not aligned with Iran, and also with the exception temporarily of the Palestinians. But they would have already gained huge numbers going into Israel to work. That was part of the deal. It would have doubled, even tripled, the amount of Gazans that come into Israel to work. And of course, we know what the Gazan workers did. They infiltrated Israel that day. They knew where to go, and they raped and kidnapped their former employers. But this was supposed to improve their lives tremendously. And Iran stopped that. We have to remember where Israelis were on that day also. You remember? We were fighting each other. On Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, Jews came to blows physically with each other in a public square in Tel Aviv about whether to have a mechitza, a prayer divider, in a public square. We fell that low. We were on the way to a civil war. There have been 12 civil wars in the history of the Jewish people. And the last thing we needed was another one. And it's always been our enemies that remind us who we are and that we can't afford to be fighting each other. And so I covered, as the Jerusalem Post chief political correspondent analyst, I covered our share of Israelis fighting other Israelis. I got out of that business in June of 2022 when I left the Knesset to take the job at Honest Reporting. I'm probably the only person who's left the Knesset after more than 20 years without an indictment. On my last day of work at the Jerusalem Post, the government fell apart, which was a little symbolic because I'm the one who helped form that government accidentally by giving a young new politician named Naftali Bennett in 2012 the phone number of another new young up-and-coming politician named Yair Lapid. And so they say in Judaism that if you make 3 shidduchs, 3 matches, you get into heaven automatically. Well, I made 1 political shidduch, and I'm told if I make 2 more, I go straight to hell. So my 4th time in Gaza was this time coming in as Honest Reporting, and I wanted to see for myself what's really going on there. And I was impressed by the progress in this war and realize this will be a significant accomplishment if we just reach those last final goals. We need to bring the hostages home, and we need to finish Hamas off for the betterment of the people of Israel and the Gazans as well. And it can still happen. It's pretty amazing that it's gone on this far, to a whole 4 months. If I would have spoken to you on October 6th and told you that President Biden was going to let Netanyahu go to war in Gaza for 4 months, you would have thought I'm crazy. But he did. And we have to think about how this happened, that the war has been allowed to go on for so long, the longest war in Israel's history since the War of Independence. Reason number one is obviously how justified this war is. The world saw the terrible atrocities of October 7th and realized how Israel needs to go to war in order to prevent this from happening again. And the Hamas said they will do it again and again. The second reason why the world has let Israel go to war for so long is because terror needs to be defeated. And if it doesn't, then it'll be emboldened everywhere around the world. There'll be more September 11th, God forbid, and more Bataclans and more 7/7s, God forbid. And so the world realizes that, at least the leaders do. The third reason why the war has been allowed to go on for so long is after Israelis were so divided, right now they are so united. The street corners in Israel are full of the slogan, Yachad Nenatzach, together we'll win. And the same people who screamed at each other in public squares over inconsequential issues like judicial reform in matters of religion and state, weeks later jumped on grenades to save each other's life. Now, the last reason that I'll give you about why this war has been able to go on for so long to the point that our goals are almost accomplished is that winning on the media battlefield is the key to winning on the military battlefield. And the IDF finally realized that after 75 years of not getting it. In May of 2021, there was a war in Gaza. And at the time, Israel destroyed a tower that was known as the Associated Press Tower. They gave an hour for everybody to leave so nobody would get hurt. That also gave them an hour to film it from every possible angle, and Israel looked terrible around the world. And the IDF leadership didn't care. They didn't realize why that mattered. They only allowed it to be released that this was the cyber tower of Hamas, and it was jamming Iron Dome and bringing it down saved lives, when the war was already long done and nobody was paying any attention anymore. Fast forward to this war, when the world believed what Hamas said about 500 people being killed by Israel in a hospital, mostly women and children. The world believed it, Hamas and their non-existent health department, as if it was gospel from Jesus. That the IDF quickly found out the truth and released it to the media. That the Islamic Jihad fired an errant rocket from the cemetery next door to the hospital, killing 25 people in the parking lot. That's all. And of course, 25 people is a terrible tragedy, but far away from 500. And how many were killed by the IDF? How about none? And the fact that the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Commander of the Air Force were up all night to make sure that information would get out there to the world shows that the Army has learned its lessons. And that's important. And the media battlefield is also being fought by people who care around America. Let's see what we have in this room. Let's see. So how many of you posted something in favor of Israel on social media or shared something since October 7th? Wow. Okay. And how many of you are on Facebook? How many of you are on X, formerly known as Twitter, or were until recently? How many of you are on Instagram? How many of you are on Telegram? Just me and Hamas? Okay, all right. Okay, and how many of you are on Snapchat? Okay, no one above the age of 20. All right, and how many of you are on TikTok? How many of you are, that's really a small number actually. That's surprisingly low. Okay. I guess afraid of Chinese knowing everything about you. How many of you are on LinkedIn? Yeah, students are required to join LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where we have a majority, the pro-Israel people. It's actually gratifying to post pro-Israel things on LinkedIn. How many of you are on none of them? How do you see your grandchildren? How do you spy on them? That's how you know who they're dating. Okay, all right. You've got time. All right, so everybody except that handful who raised their hands now are part of the successful fight on the social media battlefield, and I salute you. It's very important, and we'll get to why momentarily, but first I do want to talk about the success that my organization has had. Honest Reporting, as Dr. Goda pointed out, has been around for more than 20 years. It was started when there was a photo of a bloodied boy on the cover of New York Times with a menacing-looking soldier, and the world reported that this is a Palestinian boy who was harmed by this scary soldier. And the boy's father saw the picture in the newspaper back in Chicago and said, "That's my son. His name is Tuvia. He's Jewish." And the soldier saved his life from an angry Arab mob. And that soldier is actually not even Jewish. He's Druze. And the New York Times caption saying that this happened on the Temple Mountain near the Al-Aqsa Mosque was also wrong. There's no gas station up there to fuel the camels. And that led to an email group being formed and then a website that didn't attract all too much attention until I got there, with all due respect. But since when I took over, I said, we're going to be a lot more aggressive now. Let's make some waves. And so since I got there in July of 2022, we have gotten 8 anti-Semitic, Hitler and Hamas-praising journalists either suspended or fired, including 2 at AP, 2 at CNN, and 3 at the New York Times. So I'll take you back. There was a war in Gaza in August of 2022. It was only 2.5 days. And so when my team got to work the day after, I said, who covered this war? There's no freedom of the press in Gaza. It's all under the dictatorship. And they looked into who wrote for the mainstream media outlets, and they found that the guy who covered the war for the New York Times, Fadi Hanona, had written on his social media, I don't trust any... Where did it all go? Y'all get up. Okay. I'm in favor of killing every Jew, including the elderly and babies. Jews are sons of dogs, and I'm in favor of burning them like Hitler did. That's what the guy who covered the war for the New York Times wrote on his social media in Arabic. And I got a meeting with Patrick Kingsley, the bureau chief of the New York Times, over lunch. And he said, you guys at Honest Reporting did a better job vetting that guy than I did. You think? I told him, actually not one guy, 3. Because this morning when I told my team, I'm going to be having lunch with the bureau chief of the New York Times, give me something to talk about, my team found 2 more. They found Hossam Salem, who had praised on social media the Har Nof shooting and stabbings attacks in a synagogue, which was the model for Pittsburgh, Poway, Copenhagen, Christchurch attacks in houses of worship around the world. And they found Suleiman Hiji, who in August of 2022, we got fired for praising Hitler on social media and the New York Times rehired him on October the 8th. They said, well, he violated our guidelines last year, but this year he won't. Until people started writing on social media after seeing our report. So the New York Times rehired a Nazi to cover a war of annihilation against the world's only Jewish state. And we have not seen his byline since then, thank God. Same holds true of a guy named Issam Adwan, who was the main writer in Gaza for the Associated Press. Until 2 weeks into the war, we found that he had written on his social media in English that Jews are Nazis and they have to be annihilated. He wrote a few months before the war. And so the Associated Press suspended him pending an investigation that 3 months later has not yet even begun. And so then we started questioning, who are these photographers that made their way across the border? If we can show the first video, I'll tell the story. Some of these pictures that were taken that made the top photos of 2023 lists of AP, Reuters, and the New York Times were really early that day. So we asked, how did they know to be there? Were they tipped off by Hamas? Were they even embedded? And then we found out that some of them are very close to Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas. We can keep it on mute because this one's in Arabic, but you can read the English. This is an Instagram Live we found of two of the photographers talking, and they're laughing about the video that this guy, Abu Mustafa, took with his phone of a soldier being dragged out of a tank, dead, into Gaza. And he's telling what he did earlier that day. He said, I was there right from the beginning, and I went to Sderot, and I took people out of their houses. I took the men, I killed the dogs. And the women, he starts telling the people of Gaza, there's still time to get the women. You can take as many settler women as you want and do whatever you want with them. And this guy, Abu Mustafa, they carried the three within seconds. She's so happy, so excited. He's still employed by Reuters to this very day. And we're trying to raise the outrage. And that's what social media is for. A change that I made was that after 20 years of honest reporting, covering mainstream media, people fetching at CNN, screaming at the TV, and hoping the TV would hear them, that we need to shift to social media where the young people get their news. And that's where our focus has really been over the last couple of years. We can, really it will not repeat itself. So please God, inshallah, it shouldn't repeat itself. And so social media became the focus. 2022, 4 million people saw our stuff on social media. 2023, we went up from 4 million to 123 million. And out of those 123 million, 45% are under 25, and 89% are under 45. That shows we're getting out of our echo chamber, and that's really important. I'm 46, and that's not old. But that's what we got to be doing. We got to be harnessing the social media. Just one more example. The BBC has been around for 150 years. For the first time ever, on November 15th, they apologized twice in one day. First, they apologized by saying in the morning the IDF went into a hospital to target Arabic speakers and medical personnel, meaning everybody in the hospital. When the truth is they went to arrest wanted terrorists, and just in case, to ease the situation, they took soldiers who are Arabic speakers and medical personnel. And when the BBC got complaints from us They went on TV and said, we're sorry, this was beneath our normal editorial standards, whatever those are for the BBC. But later on that day, they reported that 10,000 people attended a pro-Israel rally in Washington, which is true. There were 10,000 people there. There were 290,000 other people there too, but at least they were right. I knew 10,000 people there myself, I think. How many of you were at the rally? Good for you. Yishai Rebo, man, he's good. Maccabees. So look, they had to apologize twice in one day. That's a very, very big deal. But, okay, so why does it matter, this social media? Why does it matter that we're fighting that fight? So I'll take back most of the people in the room. You can just watch for a second here. When we were growing up, here, I can't believe I'm starting a sentence like that. When we were growing up and we needed basic facts, where did we look to find them? Encyclopedias. Have you ever heard of encyclopedias? Have you ever held one? No. Molly has never opened an encyclopedia before. Okay. Nowadays, when you want a basic fact, what do? You Google it. Okay, so experiment. If you Google, what is Zionism? You get dictionary.com, Wikipedia, relatively innocent, factual things. We'd plenty to nitpick, but not all that bad. Then try to TikTok, what is Zionism? And you get, your first entry will have a hashtag Free Palestine. And your second entry will have a hashtag Allahu Akbar. More than 50% of people under 30 use TikTok as their search engine, not Google. And none of them have held an encyclopedia or opened one. So that makes you understand, maybe, how we got to the point that among that age group, a majority believe that the October 7th atrocities were justified. A majority believe that Israel is committing genocide. And a majority believe that Hamas is a reasonable organization that we can talk to, committed to resistance. And now those numbers have gone down, thank God, over time, because we're educating, and so are plenty of other important organizations. So I'll end with just giving y'all some advice about what you can do. There's somebody who inspired me over the last couple weeks who can really be a model for all of us. That person is Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is the model for pro-Israel advocates because she came under attack on social media over the last couple weeks. She was maligned wrongly. And those Swifties, they all came out and fought for her until they won, didn't they? We need to use these Swifties as our model. We can win like them if we play our cards right. There are obviously a lot more Swifties in the world than there are Jews. And Taylor alone has more money than all Jews combined on the face of this earth. Especially if she marries that football player. To combine their fortunes, we can't contend with that, but we can do our best. My advice to you, if any of you have unsubscribed from newspapers because they did things wrong about Israel, resubscribe to them. And tell us what's wrong with them. Write action at HonestReporting.com. I'll have flyers at the end of the talk that I'll take out that you can take that have in it that address so we can get it fixed. Or we can write articles about why they're wrong that explain patterns that are important to understand. Or we can shame them on social media if it's particularly egregious. Send stuff to us. Subscribe to honestreporting.com/subscribe. Sign up your children and grandchildren without asking their permission. We only send out like 3 emails a week. They probably won't complain. Enter the fray. When you see articles online that are problematic, respond. You never know when you're going to have an Esther moment of being in the right place at the right time, influencing someone that has a big effect on the future of this country and this world. Respond respectfully without belittling or name-calling. You don't have to like something to learn from it. And if you see something that's totally horrendous on social media, absolutely report them to the companies, to Meta, to Facebook, to Instagram, to X. I can't believe I just said X. Because it's important. And it was very nice that in the introduction they said to go to Honest Reporting. Our website's not ready. We're remodeling it completely. And in about 3 weeks, it's going to become an educational resource that's going to change the world. So little by little. But I just want to end with what I started with, about having faith. Okay? We just read not too long ago in the Torah, Rabbi, I'm getting to the Torah part. In the Torah about getting out of Egypt. And the Jews, before they got out of Egypt, probably lost their faith. 4/5 didn't even end up leaving because they didn't believe that freedom was on the way. The same thing happened with Jews behind the Iron Curtain. The same thing happened with my grandparents in the concentration camps. They didn't believe a Jewish state was on the way. And just like that, now, when things are really, really bad, when we just had the worst attack since the Holocaust, and the worst thing that's happened around the world since September 11th, we can't give up faith that better days are around the corner. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you very much. So I'm happy to take some questions. The rabbi wanted to daven first. No, after the questions.
No, you want to say something?
Oh, no, I just wanted to know if Gil wanted to handle his own Q&A.
Yes. We'll do a Q&A in just one moment. Thank you, Gil, so much for, laughter, but within the context of truth and honesty. And thank you for joining us here in Gainesville for this very important subject and a call to action. He put us all, he gave us an action plan which can and should be followed. We recently in Gainesville experienced the entire community together. Students and Latchin County residents came together to speak out and speak up about something that was happening locally, Gil, and it was successful.
Yeah?
Yes, thank God, and he's right. When you see something or you read something that's not proper or correct, there has to be a way to respond properly and effectively, hopefully. But the main thing is to take action. I would like to call upon my colleague, Rabbi Aaron, to recite chapter 20 of Psalms, followed by a presentation to our guest, a gift for him and his family. And then we'll do a Q&A. Please don't be shy to ask any question. You'll stand up, state your name, and share a question for Gil. Yes.
Do we
in the lobby, there's a charity box and coins when you leave.
do we stand or sit during that?
charity.
Then I'm going to sit. I will. I'm not going anywhere.
Read this first in Hebrew, followed by its translation in English. Lama Tzayach, Mizmor David, Gan Hanimai, Yitzhak, Yisagef, Hashem, Yaakov, Yishnach Ezecha Mikodesh, Umitzia, Yisadeka, Yizbeka, Mimchesecha, Ve'lascha, Yidashna Selah, Yitem Lecha, Chilavecha, V'atzascha, Yimalei, Neran Nabishuasecha, V'Shem Aleinu Nidgel, Yimalei Adinoi, Kol Mishatisecha, Atoya יעננו משמי קודשי בקורס ישע ימיני, אלא ברך ואלא מסוסים, ואנחנו בשם אדינו אלוהים נזכיר, הם קרו ונפלו, ואנחנו קמנו וניצדד, אדינו השיע מלך יעננו וינקרנו. For the conductor is Psalm by David. May the Lord answer you on the day of distress. May the name of the God of Jacob fortify you. May he send your help from the sanctuary and support you from Zion. May he remember all your offerings and always accept favorably your sacrifices. May he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill your every counsel. We will rejoice in your deliverance and raise our banners in the name of our God. May the Lord fulfill all your wishes. Now I know that the Lord has delivered his anointed one, answering him from his holy heavens with the mighty saving power.
Is the Garbett family Fred Garbett?
Some rely upon
Fred
chariots,
Garbett, I'm
some
very
on
close to
horses.
him.
Good man.
I knew Jared.
I want to recognize the presence, but also, more importantly, thank Joseph Ben Sabat, the president of the Chabad Student Group. I want to thank the Chabad UF vice president and president of SSI, Students Supporting Israel, Amit Sapir, that's here, that always works on behalf of Jewish causes, and pro-Israel activity. Thank you, and all the students that always make Chabad UF so special, and our local community that have embraced us for over 24 years since our first day at Westside Park. I don't want to get emotional, and this is not the time for it, but we'll speak about that another time. More importantly, your questions and answers for Gil. As Gil comes back up here, I have a few gifts for you to add to your collection. I promise you this will be very well received wherever you put them to use. First, for yourself and your family, a Jewish Gator Kiddush cup set.
Whoa.
Please don't forget the Pavlin. It says that on the side. Ailey, can you open it up and show it to him and present it to him? And also, two more very important Jewish Gator t-shirts. We get requests from all over the world for this, and this was just made a few months ago, unfortunately, because of the situation, but Gator Nation stands with Israel, and Am Yisrael Chai t-shirts for your family, for your children. So you'll add that to your collection, and just look at that Gator Kiddush cup, which you'll use in good health.
Is it shaped like an alligator?
No, it's not. It's not a bad idea to do that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll put that in the back for you. Please, if you have a question for Gil, rise. Please speak loud. Your name, just your name and your question for Gil.
Yes, name.
Hi, I'm Betsy Blue, and yesterday, literally yesterday, I saw an article on the front page of the New York Times that was referring to 4 ways that they could topple Netanyahu.
They being the opposition to Netanyahu?
But yes, they say that there is Israeli opposition that can be built upon to topple an elected government that is in the middle of a war. Isn't this the kind of thing that we would like to find a way to take on? And how can we maintain our unity when it's constantly being chipped away?
The question is about an article in the New York Times about how Netanyahu could be defeated politically. And the question implied that toppling a prime minister during war is problematic, which is a legitimate opinion. In general, around the world, reigning leaders are strengthened by war. It's happened throughout history. Let's not forget, who holds the record among American presidents for highest popularity in a public opinion poll? Roosevelt was before polls. Who is the most popular president in the history of America? There were no polls when George Washington was the president of the United States. Correct. Who said that? The most popular president in the history of the United States of America was George W. Bush immediately after September 11th.
You raised the leg?
Yes. So it went down for the rabbi, I guess, a little bit. Okay. So I'll say it again for the camera because the people on Zoom. Joni, Ronnie, you won't believe this, but the most popular president in the history of America in public opinion polls is George W. Bush after September 11th. Okay. Who is the most popular prime minister in the history of Israel? Not Golda Meir. She's more popular in Hollywood than in Israel. Ben Gurion had no polls. Not Netanyahu either, no. Begin is interesting because Begin is the answer when people are asked who is the best prime minister in retrospect among all the prime ministers. He always wins that poll. But the question was, who is the most popular prime minister in public opinion polls ever? No one ever guesses it. The answer is Ehud Olmert at the start of the Second Lebanon War because of the rally around the flag effect. Okay, who is the least popular president in the history of the United States? The least popular president, last time I checked, in the history of America while in office is George W. Bush. Okay? Who is the least popular prime minister in Israel's history? Ehud Olmert. You got it. You're good at this. So, and he was only prime minister for a very short period of time. But he managed to be the most and the worst. And so did Bush. That just shows the power of the rally around the flag effect, that people are loyal to their leader in a war. And it makes complete sense. Netanyahu in this war has experienced no rally around the flag effect because he has been blamed for the war. And so right now, when the question is asked about whether you think Netanyahu is doing a good job, he's down to 19%. And obviously Netanyahu wants to stay on as long as he can. If Netanyahu had his way, he would be prime minister he's only 74. He'd be prime minister for another 10 years until he's old enough to run for president of the United States. But it's not going to happen. At a certain point, Israel will elect new leaders who won't be blamed or who can't be blamed for what happened on October 7th. And there are many ways politically to bring it about. There might be protests of 1 million people. That's not the way to do it as long as Netanyahu has 64 members of Knesset out of 120 who want to stay in power. He will, but there will eventually be a commission of inquiry, which is what brought down Golda. Yes, sir.
Adam Bronson. My question is, when you mention, these bureau chiefs who told you that they haven't vetted, their stringers like you have.
No, they denied embedding. That Hamas embedded the.
No, that the people you've talked to in Jerusalem haven't vetted the people the way you vetted them.
Oh, vetted, yes.
My question is, this isn't a recent, you know this and I know this is not recent occurrences. Big newspapers, small newspapers do this all the time, and it seems to be a pattern of course, specifically with Israel and Israel-related issues. My question is why? Why do you think that they don't do
Diligence.
the diligence that you and I would do in our own basic
Hiring.
homework that they might actually do in other areas of their professional life? I mean, I could go to a dark place about it.
No.
But the question is it that, or is it something else from your perspective?
Okay, I'm glad you asked the question because there are journalism majors in the room. Okay? And I want you to know, if you want to work for the Associated Press or Reuters, it's much harder to get a job working for them in Manhattan than it is to get a job working for them in Gaza. In Gaza, their standards have fallen pretty low because I guess there aren't too many English speakers there. who have experience in journalism, and Israel has not let journalists roam freely in Gaza as they did in wars until 2014, in part because we would like to minimize the amount of journalists who get killed. And so they only come in embedded with the IDF for a day where the IDF is protecting them, similar to what happened with me when I went in. And then they show them tunnels and whatever else is important for the world to know. And that's something that made it a lot harder for the media outlets. I mean, they have had to rely on ordinary Gazans with cell phones or on people of the, oh my gosh, I forgot to show the other videos, who aren't particularly skilled and have, they don't want to get killed, right? So they have parroted Hamas's line. Anything else people want to know? Students, yes, Eli.
Yeah. So my question is, what's your advice to like journalism students like us who are supposed to or are learning to uphold the standard of objectivity, but at the same time, you know, this with Israel is going on, and we're, you know, obviously we could be objective with Israel and report honestly, but how do we navigate doing that and advocating for, you know, for Israel while at the same time upholding a standard of objectivity and being a journalist?
So the question is about, for people who want to be journalists when they grow up, how you handle objectivity if you're also a pro-Israel advocate. And, you know, what if you end up being someone who does the radio commentary on a UF game, okay? And they're playing Alabama, and you happen to like UF, and you happen to despise Alabama. Could you do the commentary in that game? Yeah, and that's how it is. You can report even though you have that bias. Now, what we recommend, though, is if you would actually go on the field and murder Alabama students, you're probably someone that shouldn't be covering that game. So there's a certain line that has to be drawn. And I have no problem with an anti-Semite, you know, doing a cooking blog in China or something, but they just shouldn't be covering the Jewish state if they want us all dead. And I think that's fair enough. And but yeah, you can learn your objectivity. I covered politics for the Jerusalem Post for 24 years. No one knows who I vote for, and I'm very proud of it. I want to point out one other thing as a defense of journalists, as long as we've got future journalists in the room. Journalism has gotten a lot harder over time. I'm old enough to remember calling in a story on a payphone. Do you know what one of those is? Have you ever seen one? It's like Superman used to go in them to change clothes. I remember going to, younger people than you guys are already old. But I remember covering a press conference at 10 o'clock in the morning and having an 8 p.m. deadline and starting to write the story at 7:15 p.m. Now, if you cover a 10 a.m. press conference, your story is online and leading the website by the time the press conference is over, and you had to live tweet it or live exit, and you had to take pictures for Instagram and video for TikTok. It's gotten a lot harder than it used to be, and the accuracy is what ends up falling by the wayside. People used to, when they covered press conferences, used to tape them in something called a tape recorder that captured people's voices in a little thing. That's not a phone. So I wish we still did. Yes, sir.
You're speaking to a crowd, supportive crowd.
Sure.
And I was at the county commission meeting that the rabbi was referring to, and I thought it was in a parallel universe. I mean, it's Twilight Zone. And we're talking about Jewish kids, Jewish adults with, you know, getting up 40 or 50, or I don't know, 5 or 6 of us or something there. But, Israel, you're doing fine with what you're doing, but Israel is losing the visual on TV. Look at CNN. I mean,
Okay, so the question is, how do we lose, how do we deal with the visuals that are so anti-Israel? I'm going to show you a couple videos that'll explain what we do to fight the fight. Because if the fight is being fought on social media, then we need to be fighting it over there. That's the answer is we've gotten out of that echo chamber. We have found ways to make the young people follow what's going on and see our stuff. One way of doing it is there are plenty of celebrities who've posted things that are anti-Israel, and then we can respond, and then people that go to the websites or the Instagrams of those celebrities will see our stuff. People go to the websites and the Instagram pages of the celebrities because they're pretty, or because they sing well, or they act well, and then they end up being exposed. If they're going to be exposed to the anti-Israel side, they might as well be exposed to the pro-Israel side. How ready are we back there? Soon. Okay, and so I'm going to show you. I could have decided to make myself the face of honest reporting, but I don't really care. And I think it's better to show young women who present honest reporting quite well. And so there are a couple examples of that, of what we're going to be showing. There is a woman who was doing nice TikTok videos, who called herself the Jewish Ginger. And her name is Sarah, and we decided, wow, she's doing such a good job, she should work for us. And we drafted the Jewish Ginger, and she made this video.
He is a journalist who spent the last 100 days in IDF reserve duty fighting in Gaza. No matter where you stand on this issue, Roy's reflections of his 3 months in Gaza are worth listening to. Here's the summary. First, Gaza is the most densely populated area in the world, except it's not. It was a modern city with large houses, modern apartments, wide boulevards, a beachside promenade, and public spaces. Roy even compared Gaza to Tel Aviv. Speaking of, most of the houses that he saw in Gaza were larger than his own apartment in Tel Aviv. And they were filled with modern furniture, advanced technology, and diverse food that had come from all over the Middle East. The notion that Palestinians fought Israel because they had nothing left to lose simply does not apply. Second, the most common item found in Gaza is a map like this one taken from Roy's Twitter that shows Israel and the Palestinian territory with the heading Map of Palestine. He found it in every home, every school, and every public institution. The obvious message, erasing the state of Israel completely. Hamas's incitement and ideology is everywhere in Gaza. Take a look at these pages Roy took from a calendar in Gaza. It's not your typical sunset or dog calendar. Every month serves to glorify and normalize violence against Israelis. Look at this children's puzzle. If this is the kind of passive message being portrayed on a puzzle, can you imagine what Palestinian children are actively being taught in school? Third, in every neighborhood Roy visited, there were weapons, tunnels, and rocket launchers. There is no conceivable way that Gazans did not know what was happening in their own backyard. The IDF leaflets warning Gazans to evacuate are still everywhere, littered all over the ground. Anyone who chose to stay was made well aware that they were in a combat zone. The people who stayed were either members of Hamas themselves or Palestinians who chose to stay put despite the IDF's warnings. That brings me to Roy's fourth point. Hamas members usually walk around Gaza unarmed and in civilian clothing. Why is that? Because Hamas knows they won't be unalived if they pretend to look like innocent civilians. They know that the IDF protects innocent civilians. This type of deception is what makes fighting in Gaza unlike any other war zone. Lastly, and arguably Roy's most important point, is what he referred to as Hamas's strongest weapon: their lies and propaganda, and the international media that has enabled these lies to metastasize. When will the international media stop allowing themselves to be used as an essential tool of a terrorist organization? Roy Yudofsky
Okay,
is
we can pause that one. Thank you, Alex. So you heard the word unalived. You can't say the word killed on TikTok. So that's why she said unalived. You can play the other video of a woman. You'll see Rachel, and she's responding to what happened at that event.
Can you say what the name of that is, that woman who does that, the Jewish ginger?
The Jewish ginger, yeah.
And we could search it.
You on TikTok and Instagram, sure. That was on Instagram, right? But it's also on TikTok. And so
Palestinian protesters, do they really know what they're doing?
Protesters calling themselves anti-Zionist Jews defaced half a dozen billboards all across the Bay Area that they say are fueling Islamophobia. Those billboards were put up by the group known as Jew Belong with the message, quote, "Let's be clear, Hamas is your problem too."
Calling for the end of Zionism is not about fighting colonialism. It's actually opposing Jews having a state in their indigenous homeland. Calls to globalize the Intifada are explicit calls for suicide bombings, shootings, and stab attacks against Jews around the world. It's not a chant for peace and definitely not a call for a ceasefire.
وهذا حتى كما قلت لك اصبح شعار في الولايات المتحده وفي العواصم الغربيه وعند الجمهور الغربي الامريكي والغربي انه الشعب فلسطين حره من النهر الى البحر. هذا شعار الطلاب الامريكان وفي العواصم الاوروبيه كذلك.
The popular protest chant from the river to the sea is not an expression of solidarity. It's a call for the end of the Jewish state, threatening the safety and security of the majority of the world's Jews. See, a recent study found that 60% of university students changed their mind once they understood the implications behind from the river to the sea. Years from now, will these protesters be proud or embarrassed that they stood against the world's only Jewish state and publicly supported a genocidal and reactionary terror organization?
okay, so yes, that's how we respond, by setting the record straight and calling their lies and calling their from the river to the sea in their face of what it really is. And Palestinian leaders are the ultimate spokespeople, because what he was saying there is, isn't it great that the American college students have been adopting from the river to the sea? If Hamas is saying you're doing a good job, then you're probably getting it wrong. The last two links are just for a second. Might as well get them
9
on.
million Palestinians live in Gaza, one of the most densely populated areas on earth, now being pummeled by Israeli airstrikes. 9 million Palestinians
We can pause.
live in Gaza.
How many lies can there be in a 6-second video? How many Palestinians live in Gaza? 2 million. So CNN is only off by 7 million, not bad. And is Gaza one of the most densely populated places on earth? Not even among the top 150. Miami is, New York is, Tel Aviv is, but the tops are Manila and Hong Kong. You can just leave on the only one that we didn't show yet, which is we put carousels with memes of things for people to think about. Yep, it says taking hostages will not free Palestine over and over again. And that also responds to your question. That's what we remind people of the truth. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to show my videos and things that I prepared and I forgot to show.
One more question?
So
Take another question or two?
there are students answering, but yeah. No. 4 more questions.
4 more questions.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, is there a plan for Gaza when the war ends?
What happens to Gaza when the war ends? The answer is there would be an international stewardship of Arab and Muslim countries that have made peace with Israel or are about to, who will be involved in the reconstruction as well as the, not re-education, that's a bad word, but educational reconstruction of Gaza. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. It'll dovetail with the expansion of the Abraham Accords. And what's important to note about that is that as part of the Abraham Accords, the countries who signed them were required to change their curriculum and make it not anti-Israel anymore, and it happened. In the UAE, they're no longer taught to hate Jews. And that will happen in Gaza too, which is a very big change from UNRWA that taught their kids to hate. Yes, sir.
Um,
What's your name?
My name is Mati.
Mhm.
some type of accusation. That's one piece of the question. The second piece is, why are Israel's kind of narratives towards different points of the conflict so like wordy and not like digestible as opposed to the Palestinian ones are always so easy to spread and to pass and to, kind of as a journalist, how do you respond to that?
To answer your question, I mean, you could keep up the Instagram slide that there was before, but we are doing our best, and I don't think that the Hamas propaganda is as good as people say, or the war would have been over a long time ago. I think we're trying to both be, to answer your first part of the question, be proactive and reactive. Unfortunately, a war was started by the other side that we didn't want, and we have to keep on reminding people of it. When you're on campus, it's when a war breaks out, it's too late, right? You had to be proactive. I'm sure you were, Amit, way before there was any war, in getting out the messages about Israel beyond the conflict and within the conflict. And I'm sure you were ready when October 7th came, because you're the model for things that are being done right. So, but yes, we have to have statements that are quick and short for people of short attention spans, like taking hostages will not free Palestine. Last two questions over here.
As someone who's a little bit more experienced in the media field in Israel, I have kind of like a two-part question.
Sure.
The first is kind of, we've seen very early on, especially before the war, with the whole judicial reform, there's a lot of internal strife with different news agencies. They were being like, alright, so just all these, different agencies. My question was specifically, how do we see a future where we kind of break out from like the idea of different shvatim and different divisions to create more unison in the Jewish-Israeli audience? And another question, kind of following up on that, is the anti-Zionist Jewish nonprofit movements such as Breaking the Silence and B'Tselem. We hear on our college campuses and across college campuses around America a lot of anti-Zionist Jewish organizations such as Jewish Voice for Peace, and sadly a bunch of Jews who are partnering up against anti-Israel. We don't hear too much about the internal anti-Zionist groups, like I mentioned with Breaking the Silence. How can we foster more change within Israel to try to combat what's actually going on there with the internal pro-Israel community within Israel, and also the anti-Israel news agencies?
To answer the question, Israel's more patriotic right now than it's ever been during this war. Everywhere it says Yachad Nenatzach, together we'll win. And groups that have in any way within Israel condemned anything that Israel's doing, or endorsed Hamas or anything, have come to light, and we know who they are. Jewish Voices for Peace is an anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas organization that has come out squarely in defense of murdering from house to house members of kibbutzim, including Holocaust survivors. They are in favor of going to dance festivals and murdering as many people as you can. They don't hide it. They do use a name that makes it sound palatable by calling themselves Jewish when they're not, and for peace when they're not. And so they have to be exposed for who they are, and we at Honest Reporting have done that, and we'll continue to do that, and you should do it too. But within these are fringe groups. People need to realize that these are fringe groups, and every ethnicity has fringe groups. But within the mainstream, within the pale, we need to celebrate the vibrancy of Israeli democracy, that there are people from all ends of the political spectrum and religious perspective, and that we're all struggling and finding a way to get along against all odds. And I'm sure that you have your challenges with doing that over here too. But so expose the extremists and celebrate the people who aren't. I think answers both parts of your question.
Sorry, do you know who funds Jewish Voice for Peace? They are well organized, well funded. They were the group that pushed forward an agenda here locally that, thank God, got some pushback, and they were very well placed locally, and and they actually claim to have 600 plus thousand members worldwide. That's what they claim, which is still not much worldwide, but that's what they claim.
Okay, so look, there's an organization called NGO Monitor that's their job. You know, we focus on the media, and they have exposed the funding of Jewish Voices for Peace and every other anti-Israel organization, and they're a wonderful resource. I can tell you who funds Students for Justice in Palestine is Qatar. And people need to realize, you know, Jews have been accused of a lot of things, of dominating the media or Hollywood or academia, when the truth is that Qatar does that. You know, they give them money for plenty of universities, and they control so much, and their lobby's bigger than ours in Washington, that's for sure. And people need to realize who they are and how destructive they are. This will be our last question because people are getting antsy, and I want people to stay and take my flyers.
Just a small question. I was just curious, what news outlets and English-speaking news outlets do you, or do Honest Reporting, I guess, consider to be doing the best coverage of this war? Like, if someone would come to you and say, like, I have no idea what's going on, like, what should I be doing to investigate? What would you say?
I'm so sorry, but really none of them. I mean, I can't with a good conscience. I like the Torah, but you know, I'll put that out for somewhere. I encourage people to get your weather and sports from local media over here, and when it's about news about Israel, not get it from any American media outlet at all. You know, I still have a column in the Jerusalem Post every 2 weeks. My wife is the deputy CEO, so I encourage people to get their news about Israel from Israeli news outlets like the Jerusalem Post. And I think it makes a lot more sense in this day and age. It takes just as much time as to go to nytimes.com as it takes to go to jpost.com and other websites like it. And what I'd like to end with is, as the rabbi passes out these flyers, Honest Reporting is a very small organization. There are only 3 writers and 2 social media people, and we've had this much success. If you could give us any help at all, we appreciate it, because we need to be even more effective, which we do if we could have a slightly larger staff. And I also encourage people to contribute to the Hillel and the Jewish Studies Department and the Chabad at the University of Florida, so you can continue to be the models for the Hillels and Chabads and Jewish Studies departments for universities around the earth. Thank you very much.